I noticed something was wrong the moment he asked about the deed. Not the first time, not even the second. It was the fifth time. And the way his eyes didn't move to the window when he asked, the way they stayed fixed on me. That I knew. I just didn't know how bad it would get. My name is Margaret, and I am 63 years old. I live on 4 acres in rural Tennessee in a house I have owned outright since my husband passed 11 years ago. Daniel built that house with his own hands and the hands of his father before him. The wraparound porch, the root cellar, the workshop out back where he kept every tool organized by size and purpose, the way a man organizes things when he believes the next generation will need them. I never sold it, never even considered it. When Daniel died, I became the kind of woman who waters the garden at the same time every morning because routine is the only prayer that doesn't require words. My son is named Thomas. He is 34 years old, works in logistics, and has his father's jaw and his grandmother's stubbornness. For most of his adult life, Thomas dated casually, nothing serious, and I never pushed. I was not that kind of mother. I trusted that he would find someone when he was ready. I believe that the way you believe in weather, you don't control it, you just stay dressed for it. He met her at a work conference in Nashville. Her name was Brianna. She was 31, originally from somewhere in Ohio, and the first time Thomas brought her home for Sunday dinner, she complimented every single thing in the house. The furniture, the cast iron skillet hanging above the stove, the framed photograph of Daniel's grandfather standing in front of the original structure before the addition was built in 1967. This place is a piece of history, she said, and she touched the door frame the way people touch things they are already imagining owning. I thanked her. I refilled her sweet tea. I watched. Thomas was happy in a way I had not seen in years. He laughed easier. He stood taller. He called me twice a week instead of once, and the calls lasted longer. For the first few months, I allowed myself to feel glad. A mother wants her child to be chosen. Wants someone to see what she has always seen. I watched them together at Thanksgiving and I thought, maybe I am too cautious. Maybe grief made me suspicious of good things. Then Brianna asked about the property line. We were walking the backyard after dinner, the 3 of us, and she asked where exactly my land ended. I pointed toward the tree line, the old split-rail fence Daniel had replaced twice. She nodded slowly, the way someone nods when they are filing information rather than receiving it. And you own all of this outright? She said. No mortgage? No mortgage, I said. Wow, she said. That's incredible, Margaret. You're so lucky. I smiled. Thomas squeezed her hand. I said nothing. The second time she asked was 2 months later in March. We were having coffee in the kitchen, just the 2 of us, while Thomas was outside checking on a noise in his truck. She asked if I had ever thought about putting the property in a trust. I looked at her over my mug. I have an estate plan, I said simply. That's smart, she said, nodding. My uncle lost his property after he passed because he didn't have the right documents in place. It's such a shame when that happens to families. I said I was sorry to hear that. I got up and topped off the coffee pot. I stood at the counter with my back to her for 1 extra second, and I breathed. The 3rd time was a phone call. She called my cell directly, not Thomas's, to ask if I knew a good local real estate attorney. Said she and Thomas were thinking about their future and wanted to understand property rights in Tennessee. I gave her the name of a general attorney I knew from church, a woman named Carol, who I trusted completely, and then I called Carol myself that same afternoon. I didn't say anything dramatic. I just said that a young woman might be calling about property questions, and I wanted Carol to know the context. Carol said, I understand. That was enough. By April, Thomas had proposed. He told me over the phone, voice cracking the way it hadn't since he was a teenager. He was so happy. He asked me to be happy too. I told him I loved him and that I wanted to meet with him alone before any planning started, just the 2 of us, the way we had always handled important things. He agreed. He seemed relieved, actually. I wonder now what he was already carrying. We met at the diner on Route 9, the one with the bad pie and the good coffee, where we had eaten every Sunday after church for the first 12 years of his life. I did not bring notes. I did not make accusations. I simply told him what I had observed, slowly, the way you describe a sound you're not sure you heard. The questions about the deed. The call about the attorney. The way she moved through my house. Thomas went quiet for a long time. Long enough that the waitress came and went twice. Then he said, "She's just practical, Mom. She thinks about the future." "So do I said. He left frustrated. I paid the check. I drove home and I sat on the porch and I thought about Daniel and what he would have done. Daniel was a patient man, but he was not a passive one. He used to say, 'You don't have to be mean to be unmoved.' I held on to that. I started being careful in ways Brianna would not notice. I moved the original deed and title documents from the filing cabinet in my bedroom to Carol's office. Not because I suspected a specific plan. I couldn't have imagined then how specific it was. But because I trusted my instincts enough to move slowly and quietly, the way you move around a dog you are not sure about. In June, Thomas mentioned that Brianna had been asking about my health, not in a worried way, in a procedural way. Had I seen my doctor recently? Did I have a power of attorney in place? Thomas said she was just being responsible. I said that was thoughtful of her. Then I called my doctor, Dr. Patricia Hollins, who had been my physician for 9 years, and I told her that if anyone other than Thomas called asking questions about my health or my cognitive status, she was to note it, document it, and call me immediately. 3 weeks later, Dr. Hollins called me. Brianna had called the office. She had identified herself as Thomas's fiancée and future family member. She had asked whether I had shown any signs of memory issues or confusion. She had asked whether I had ever expressed a desire to downsize or relocate. Dr. Kaysen. Hollins had given her nothing and had written everything down. I sat with that information for 2 days. I did not call Thomas. I did not call Brianna. I sat on the porch with my morning coffee and I watched the light move across Daniel's fence, and I made a decision about what kind of ending this story was going to have. I hired a private investigator named Roy, a retired county sheriff's deputy I had known peripherally for years. I told him I needed to understand who Brianna was before she became family. I told him to be thorough and to be quiet. Roy came back to me 6 weeks later with a folder I still have in Carol's safe. Brianna had been engaged once before. A man in Columbus, Ohio, 15 years older, a widower with a paid-off home and a commercial property on the east side of the city. They had been engaged for 8 months. 3 months before the wedding, he had signed a document adding her to the deed of the commercial property as a joint tenant with right of survivorship. 4 months after that, the engagement ended. She kept nothing legally. He had a sharp attorney, but she had clearly understood the process. She knew exactly what documents mattered and when to ask for them. Roy also found something else. Brianna had spoken with a real estate investor in Nashville twice in the previous 4 months. A man who bought rural properties below market value and subdivided them. Roy had the phone records. I thanked him. I paid him. I put the folder in Carol's safe and I thought for a long time. The wedding was planned for the 3rd Saturday in September. 112 guests, a venue in Hendersonville, a reception at a vineyard Thomas had rented because Brianna had asked for it specifically. I attended every planning meeting I was invited to. I brought food. I smiled at the seating chart. I said the centerpieces were beautiful. I also spoke to Carol twice, and to Roy once more, and to Thomas's college roommate David, who had known my son for 15 years and who, when I explained what I had learned, went pale and quiet and said, "I have to tell you something too." David told me that in the last 2 months, Brianna had asked Thomas directly to speak with me about updating my estate plan. She had suggested, specifically, that Thomas be added to the property deed now while I was healthy to avoid complications later. Thomas had resisted. She had pushed. He hadn't told me because he didn't want to worry me and because he had started, he'd admitted this to David, not to me, to feel like something was not right. He just didn't know what to do with the feeling. That is the thing about good people. They doubt their own instincts because they want to believe the best. Thomas had his father's faith in people. I loved him for it. I had spent 11 years quietly making sure that faith didn't destroy him. The week before the wedding, I had a conversation with Thomas that I will not describe in full because some things between a mother and son belong only to them. What I will say is that I laid out everything. The folder, Dr. Hollins's notes, David's account, the real estate investor, the Columbus fiancée. Thomas did not speak for a very long time. When he finally did, his voice was level in the way that means a person is holding themselves together by concentration alone. He asked me what I thought he should do. I told him that was not my decision. I told him I had protected what needed protecting and that what happened next was his. He said, "I need a few days." I gave him the week. The morning of the wedding, I drove to Hendersonville alone. I wore the green dress I had bought for the occasion, the one Thomas had picked out with me in July, back when everything still looked different. I sat in the third row on the groom's side next to David and his wife, and I watched the venue fill with people who had no idea what was about to happen. Brianna came down the aisle in a dress that was genuinely beautiful. I will give her that. She had done everything right on the surface, the flowers, the music, the careful way she smiled at every person whose eye she caught. She was very good at surfaces. Thomas was standing at the altar. I watched him the whole walk. His jaw was tight. His hands were still. He looked, I thought, exactly like his father had looked on the day we buried Daniel's mother, present, but somewhere else, doing what needed to be done. The officiant began. The room was quiet. Vows were coming. And then Thomas spoke. He did not shout. He did not perform. He turned to face the room, all 112 guests, and he said, in a voice that was steady and clear, that he could not continue, that he had learned things in the past week that he could not unknow, that he loved Brianna, or had believed he did, but that love did not excuse what he had discovered. He thanked everyone for coming. He apologized to her family directly. He apologized to her. Then he stepped down from the altar and walked to where I was sitting, and he took my hand, and he said quietly enough that only I could hear, "You did the right thing, Mom. I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." I held his hand. The room was a confusion of murmurs and movement. Brianna stood at the altar for a moment that I imagined felt very long, and then she walked back down the aisle with her chin up, which I respected even then. Later that evening, the three of us, Thomas, David, and I, sat on my porch with the outdoor lights on and the September air starting to cool, and we talked until past midnight. Thomas cried once. I did not. I had done my crying privately, weeks before, when I realized what I had nearly lost, not the property, not the deed, not Daniel's fence or the root cellar or the workshop full of organized tools. I had nearly lost my son to a version of his life built on a false foundation. That was the thing that had kept me moving quietly through those months. Not the 4 acres, him. The property is still in my name. The documents are still in Carol's safe. I see Thomas every Sunday. He is not the same as he was before, and I do not think he will be for a while, and that is honest, and that is fine. Healing is not a straight line. It is more like the way water finds its way. Patient, persistent, and always toward the lowest ground. Daniel used to say, "You don't have to be mean to be unmoved." I think about that still, most mornings, when I water the garden at the same time every day, because routine is the only prayer that doesn't require words. Some mornings, now Thomas comes early enough to have coffee before I go outside. He leans against the counter the way he did when he was 9 years old and the world was still simple. And I hand him his mug, and we watch the light come in through the kitchen window, and we don't have to say anything at all. That is enough. That has always been enough.